Yo, what's up guys? Today we are reacting to an interesting video that I was recommended. If you guys want me to react to videos that you recommend, go on the description. In the description there's a Google form. Okay, so the name of this video is actually "Why Does Sweden No Longer Want Immigrants?" I found it to be a very interesting topic, so I'm gonna watch it and react to it. If you guys want to check out the original video, the link is in the description. Go support the creator who made this video, and I'm really interested in seeing what he had to say. As you guys know, I've been learning a lot about Sweden, and that's an intriguing title. Don't forget guys, like, subscribe, and let me know if you agree with his opinions and what he has to say in this video. Let's go.
Today's video is made possible by Masterworks. More on this in a moment.
I thought he would be Swedish though. I think he's British.
Pay close attention to these surprising statements by Sweden's Prime Minister, Social Democrat leader Magdalena Andersson.
Swedish
Okay.
PM says integration of immigrants has failed, fueled gang crime. Integration has been too poor at the same time, as we have had large immigration. Society has been too weak. Resources for the police and social services have been too weak. Segregation has been allowed to go so far that we have parallel societies in Sweden. We live in the same country, but in completely different realities. Magdalena Andersson, Swedish PM.
Let's see. Here we have a Social Democrat leader who is also in power, making statements like this about immigration. That is definitely not common at all. Something very serious must be going on in Sweden, don't you think? What exactly is the Prime Minister referring to, and why has the immigration issue come to the forefront in one of the most open countries in the world?
Okay. First thing we need to focus on here is the statements were really broad, talking about immigrants, right? But like for example, I'm an immigrant. I don't consider that I have fueled crimes or anything like that. So when the statement is broad and it involves all immigrants, I know that there are people from my country that come to the UK and they get involved with some shady stuff because they have to pay their bills, they are illegal and whatnot. But we also have a lot of great professionals. So I think using the word immigrant loosely is dangerous. But let's see what he has to say about this.
What exactly is going on in Sweden? But before we examine the different realities in Sweden, let me talk to you about a company that may change your perception of investing realities. Masterworks. Celebrities, political leaders, and titans of industry. Now
Okay. So I think this is basically a promo. Okay, I'm just gonna skip the promo. I'm sorry about that.
Panic figures.
Okay, let's take a look at the figures.
Pay close attention to the following figures because I am sure that more than one or two of you are going to be very, very surprised. In 2021, 335 shootings were recorded in Sweden, resulting in 47 fatalities. Yes,
Wow.
it's true. If you're watching us from the United States or Latin America, then these numbers may seem like a joke, almost a happy utopia. Even if we take into account the differences in population, the data is infinitely better than what the United States or practically any Latin American country registers every year. For example, in 2020, in the United States alone, homicides and shootings took the lives of more than 23,000 people. We're talking about completely different scenarios.
Yeah.
By European standards, however, the Swedish statistics are striking.
Well, then again, the population of, like for example, Brazil or the United States is far beyond the Swedish population. So of course 23,000 people for a population of 200-300 million is not, I mean, it's a considerable amount, of course, but still, you got to put it in perspective, right? Okay, let's see what...
Sweden is the country in Europe where firearms-related crime is growing the most and has the highest fatality rates. For example, while Sweden has an average of 4 deaths per million inhabitants per year due to firearms, the European average is 1.6. What's more, unlike the rest of Europe, the trend in Sweden is increasing.
That's 4 times other European countries.
This is an unusual fact. All this means, for example, that the probability of a man between the ages of 15 and 29 being shot is 10 times higher in Sweden than it is in Germany.
Whoa.
Sweden tops Europe in fatal shootings, report shows. In the
Guys.
last decade, Sweden has overtaken Italy and Eastern European countries to have the highest number of fatal shootings in Europe.
But that's not all. In 2019, 260 crimes involving explosions were recorded across Sweden, an increase of 60% over the
Explosions.
previous year. We're talking about bombs and explosive devices that are often detonated in public spaces, mostly outside apartment developments and in small businesses.
But
Surprise,
why?
If we add this to the
Is that why? Whoa, 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 wait a second. Wait a second. You're talking about bombings now.
fact that Sweden has the highest rates of rape and sexual violence in Europe, and that hate crimes against minorities, such as LGBT people, are also on the rise, then the picture becomes very clear. Obviously,
Whoa.
there is a problem in Sweden.
Whoa, I could have never imagined this, you know, because when I watched all my Swedish tourist videos, we only see the good side. But things are, well, according to this video, things are getting tough in Sweden. Do you guys agree? Let me know in the comments. Is this actually happening in Sweden? Do you see a visible change? Are things going like downhill? And is it because of the immigrants? What is your opinion? Please keep it civil. Don't you know, don't go to the dark side when you leave your comment, okay?
Surprisingly, however, if we look at all crimes, Sweden's crime rate is not particularly high. It is within the European average. In other words, the Nordic country has a particular problem with weapons, explosives, sexual violence, and attacks on minorities. Or, in other words, in the European context, Sweden has a fundamental problem with violent and sexual crimes. And this is precisely why the Swedes are by far the Europeans most concerned about crime. For them, it is
Then again, there is something that is very concerning, because I consider Sweden to be one of the countries that have the most beautiful people. So I would understand why the sexual crime is high, because some dirtbag from like a country like mine, for example, which Brazil is the third world country, and we also have criminals there, a lot. I can imagine that one of those guys manages to buy a ticket, goes to these European countries, and starts doing a lot of crazy stuff. I'm not saying all Brazilians are like that. Of course, we're not like that. But we do have criminals, you know, traveling, and that is horrible. So I can imagine why the sexual crime is high, because there's so many beautiful people. And then when these dirtbags, crazy, mentally ill scum of the earth go to these countries, they, you know, they just start going crazy.
is already the #1 concern. And this also helps to explain the words of the Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, which we saw at the beginning of this video. Now, at this point, the question I'm sure many of you are wondering is, what the hell is going on in Sweden? What on earth could explain such a wave of violence? Well, most of the shootings and explosions in Sweden involve organized crime gangs. And you see, in this Nordic country, 8 out of 10 shootings are related to criminal gangs. The problem that is causing most concern is that more than half, 53% of those sentenced to prison were born abroad. This percentage rises to almost 90% of those suspected of involvement in shootings if we take into account both foreign-born and second-generation offenders.
Wow.
VisualPolitik viewers, obviously we do not intend to point the finger at anyone because of their origin in this video. On the contrary, you know that on VisualPolitik we are all for things like freedom of movement, and we think that migratory movements are a powerful engine of prosperity, as long as things are handled correctly, of course. That's why with this video we want to put forward some factors that can hinder effective integration, and that is how the situation in Sweden can be radically different from countries like Australia, New Zealand, or even the United States. Remember the headline at the beginning of the video?
Swedish PM says integration of immigrants has failed, fueled gang crime.
Well,
Okay, so here is something that I have seen a lot of. Normally immigrants come to a European country and they don't have the opportunity to get jobs. So they get involved in crime so that they can, you know, at least make ends meet with, you know, doing crime or criminal activities. But then they start getting greedy and they start wanting more. And Sweden, for example, is a very prosperous country. So people tend to want more and more and live a luxurious life. So it is pretty daunting if you think about it. I'm not saying all crime comes from the immigrants, but you know, the numbers don't lie. And this is not only exclusive to European countries. In my country, we also have criminals from my country and from neighboring countries, because apparently there are two types of migrant, right? Professional immigrant, like myself, that comes to the country, you know, has an education, a certain level of education, looks for a better job, looks for a better life. And then we have another one who has absolutely no education. They couldn't succeed in their own country, but they want to get away from it. Sometimes people are running away from crimes that they committed, and they get into the country, they stay here illegally, and you know, they get involved with bad people. So that is something that is really complicated, and I think that should be controlled. I think countries should actually only accept professionals, you know, people with higher education, people who actually are successful in their own countries in the first place. Because honestly, guys, changing the country will not change your situation. A lot of people think that, you know, it's not working out for me in my country, I'm gonna go to a better country. If you couldn't make it in your own country, the odds of making it in another country where the culture is different, where the language is different, where everything is different, where you know nobody, you have no friends, no contacts, the chances are even slimmer. So I always tell everyone, if you want to leave your country to live in another one, make sure that your life is already successful and you have made it in your country first, and then you can take the next step. Okay? Because if you couldn't make it in your own country, if you're struggling in your own country, you're going to struggle 10 times more in a different country. Trust me, if you can't find a job in your country, it's the probability of finding a job in another country where you don't speak the language and you don't have the proper qualification, it's really slim to none.
Exactly that. So, in order to understand this whole situation, we have to ask ourselves a few questions. Is the rise of violent crime in Sweden really only the fault of immigrants? What responsibility do public authorities, that is politicians, carry here? Where, if at all, has Sweden failed? Well, let's take a look.
A single culprit?
Nah, that
VisualPolitik
doesn't
exist.
exist.
In Sweden, there is one key component that links immigration and crime: social exclusion. But wait a minute, before some of you cry out loud, no, we are not going to tell you the usual story that crime is justified exclusively by poverty and that, therefore, the solution is to give more aid and subsidies of all kinds. This is a very complex issue in which we are able to find many contributing factors, in which poverty plays a very important role. But if there is a surplus of anything in Sweden, it is precisely public aid and subsidies. In fact, although it may seem contradictory, this excess of public funds may help explain much of the tsunami of exclusion and crime that the Scandinavian country has experienced. At least.
See, the thing is, people normally don't go into crime because they're poor. That's not normally what happens. Normally, they go into crime because they want an extravagant life. Because I mean, if you work hard, you can live above poverty. But people go into crime because they want easy money, not a lot of work, and they want a lot of money. They don't want to have the average salary. They want to, you know, go all out. And other than that, some people just like the thrill. Some people like being rebels. They like the thrill of, you know, criminality. They don't want to, you know, they don't respect authority. They don't want to follow the rules. I mean, how many rich people have we seen who are involved with crime? Lots of millionaires, they have this addiction of shoplifting, you know. It's not uncommon.
At least by European standards.
And especially, you know, white collar crimes. The richer the person is, the more they are kind of like prone to do something illegal so that they can evade tax. And, you know, I'm not saying in general, I'm just saying it is something that happens. We see a lot of celebrities evading taxes and, you know, getting into other stuff. It's really hard. It's really complicated. So people, they always want more and more and more.
And it's not just us saying this. This is something that even the Social Democrat Prime Minister seems to be starting to be very clear about. The fact is that in Sweden, the immigration population receives enormous amounts of public aid, particularly if they are asylum seekers. But there is one benefit that stands out above the rest. It is the child allowance, a benefit that is not exclusive to immigrants.
UK.
In 1982, when Sweden began to experience very low birth rates, an allowance was created to provide families with a generous income for having children.
In the UK, the same thing happened. When I arrived here 5 years ago, the only thing I could see was baby prams, baby trawlers. A lot of people come to the UK just to have children so they can get aid, so they can, you know, that's kind of like a profession, a career, making babies. The more babies they have, you know, the more they earn. But those rules have been lessened.
And no, we're not talking about a one-off baby check. We are talking about an allowance that every person legally resident in Sweden receives from the month after birth until the child reaches 16 years of age. And under certain circumstances, this allowance can even be extended until the child is 20 years old. So what does the Swedish state offer for each child? Well, basically a subsidy of at least 1,250 krona, which is about 120 euros.
Oh,
or
okay.
126 US dollars a month. And
Okay.
what? The immigration policy has many more children on average. So
That's
these
per
subsidies
children,
are
right?
particularly in their favor. But in addition, there are also many other provisions that especially favor them. Take, for example, rental subsidies for large families, or advantages in accessing public housing, particularly when prices are skyrocketing and there is no other way to access housing, or direct subsidies in the case of asylum seekers, among many other programs. But the question many of you may be wondering is, let's see, Josh, what's wrong with all this? What does it have to do with the problem that we're addressing in this video? Well, basically, all these aid programs have direct consequences on the labor market. Let's say that a whole lot more people end up using public assistance as more than a transitory resource. And once again, this is not only coming from us. The employment data, for example, also points to this. And what's more, that data says it clearly. The worst part is borne by women, as many of these subsidies discourage their incorporation into the labour market and their social integration, which can already be complicated in some cultures. For example, according to Eurostat in Sweden, the employment rate of foreign-born women is almost 20 points lower than the rate of women born in the country. On the other hand, these subsidies also foster a false economic stability that causes many beneficiaries not to seek regular jobs, precisely so as not to lose these subsidies. This is fuel for the creation of informal networks that end up favouring the creation and development of criminal groups and gangs.
And this also fuels the population. So the more populous a country is, the harder it is to control, you know, the quality of life. And as he said, the more people that are leaning on the government, the less people are looking for proper jobs. So that kind of like raises the unemployment figures, and the more people are unemployed, the more they are doing stuff that they're not supposed to, right? Because, you know, human beings, like, when they're not busy with something, they they start doing stupid stuff, right? So that's why a lot of cultural programs help children get off the streets, you know, and a lot of projects help people get off the streets. So it's complicated, you know. The government wants to help, but then it only gets worse if people don't do it the right way. They misuse government funds.
In the United States and New Zealand, immigrants have higher employment rates than the native-born population. In the case of Australia and Canada, the difference in favour of native-born population is only 3.4 and 1.7 percentage points respectively. In Sweden, however, the difference is almost 15 points. In other words, we're talking about a completely different situation. And that's not all. By reducing employment rates and discouraging many immigrants from seeking formal full-time jobs, it also reduces their degree of integration and reduces their contact with the rest of society. Add to this public housing policies, and the result is a perfect cocktail for the gestation of ghettos, an environment particularly conducive to the development of gangs. And so, in Stockholm alone, there are an estimated 60 organised crime gangs operating throughout the city. The question is there a solution to all of this? What are the consequences of these policies? And what exactly does Social Democrat Sweden hope to do now? Well, as so often happens, bad policies not only lead to bad results, they also sometimes lead to bad answers, or at least insufficient responses.
This is so hard.
From white to black with no clear direction.
Suddenly, Sweden is changing, and it is changing at an accelerated pace, even if the government is still in the hands of Social Democrat politicians. Is it going in the right direction? Well, that's another debate. The fact is that while until recently Sweden was an example of a country with open doors, these days the social and political reaction could end up feeding antagonistic and hostile movements towards this reality. For example, while in 2015, Sweden became the country that took in the most Syrian refugees by far, relative to its population, now, just 7 years later, the headlines you can find on Google if you search for immigration and Sweden are quite different.
Even Sweden doesn't want migrants anymore.
Now, the Social Democrat government itself is going to implement a new immigration law, supposedly to tackle the cause of all the problems.
See, look, here's something that this is my opinion. I think that a country should be open to immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself. It wouldn't be prudent or coherent if I said otherwise. But the thing is, I do not believe, and this is the way I truly feel, I do not believe that the country should lose its culture and lose its, you know, customs. So for example, if I am leaving my country to come to this country, it's because I like the way this country has been conducting its, you know, governing its country. I come for the customs, I come for the traditions, I come for what this country has to offer. So me as an immigrant, I like that country's culture, customs, traditions. I like that. So I should not have the right to change that. In fact, I'm going to that country because I like that. So if I, as an immigrant, come to the country and I start implementing my own traditions, my own customs, my own culture, then I'm just contributing to changing what I liked in the first place. So if I don't know if you understand where I'm getting at. If I'm coming to this country, I cannot touch their values. I shouldn't be allowed to do that. Or else I should have stayed in my own country, right? Because if I come to this country and I want to change it and make it another Brazil, for example, then I'm just changing the whole country. So I think one of the rules of immigrating should be, one of the rules of immigration should be, you will not change our values. And this is something that I've seen happening all over. A lot of countries, cities, states, even the language has changed. So I mean, why? This is not, in my conception, this is not immigration. This is a takeover. I'm taking over their land, you know. So when I came to the UK, I learned, you know, how to deal with their thoughts, their countries, their customs, their culture, their food, and that's something I really, really like. And I didn't try to change the country. I didn't try to impose my culture and my tradition. Of course, I can share my traditions and my cultures and my food. I can share, but I cannot try to politically incline or implement things that came from my country. Especially because if I'm leaving my country, there's a reason, right? And I don't want this country to become what I was leaving my country behind for. Does that make sense? I'm coming to this country. For example, I hate it when immigrants and foreigners go to a cold country and complain about the cold. I mean, if you wanted it to be hot, then just stay in your, you know, tropical country. I mean, I love it when it's cold here in London. I love it when it's snowing, and I hate it when it's hot. I didn't come to the UK to see sun. I came to see snow and cold. And does that make sense? So I didn't come, like, the first thing that came to mind when I went on my honeymoon with my wife was I want to show her a different country. And it's funny because we took a cruise ship, and the first thing that happened in the cruise ship was they started playing Brazilian music, and they said, "Don't worry, we have Brazilian food here." And I'm like, "No, I want a completely different experience from what I have at home." So I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I think if I'm traveling and if I'm willing to live in another country, I should help them preserve their culture and their customs and their traditions and their food. That's my opinion. I think Sweden should not have changed the way it has, you know. I really wish this, you know, would be different. I really wish people would travel not only for the money, for the financial. I wish they would travel, you know, so because they actually identified with the culture. I live in the UK because I identified with the UK. I like the, you know, the way it's built. You know, I like the transport system. I like the way things are here in the UK, and I really don't want it to become like my own country, or else I'll go back to my own country. If I'm gonna stay here and do the same things I used to do in my country, then I'll just go back, you know. It makes absolutely no sense. If London starts getting too hot, if crimes start getting really high, I'd rather be in my own country because we have that there, you know.
New Swedish migration law makes permanent residency harder for refugees and visitors.
I agree.
With the law, people arriving from abroad will no longer have such an easy time arriving or accessing public aid, nor will it be possible to get a work permit without a contract. In addition, a minimum of 3 years living in Sweden will be required for permanent residence.
I agree.
On top of that, the justification of a minimum income of 810 euros per month will be required. The law itself does not say almost anything different from other European countries. But the point is that, in this case, the ultimate goal is that far fewer immigrants arrive. Of course, that is not the problem. Sweden has far fewer immigrants than countries like Australia, New Zealand, or Canada. But there you have it. This is the response that the Social Democrat government of Magdalena Andersson wants to give. This is a 180-degree turn in the country's politics.
Yeah, the problem is that we want to share, right? People who are good and people who have good hearts, like the Swedes, they want to share what they have. But then some people don't want to take the share. They want to take it all. So sometimes when you're too good, too kind-hearted, people take advantage of that. So I can see that, you know, Sweden really wanted to help immigrants, but then it got out of control. And this is really sad because, you know, the few made it hard for you know, the good ones. So the few small bad criminal immigrants spoiled it for all of the other ones, like myself. So if I want to go to Sweden now, you know, it's not as easy as it would be like 10 years ago. So the small amount of people who are truly bad, and they're not bad because they're in Sweden, they were probably bad in their own country as well. It gives us immigrants a bad image. And not all of us, I mean, the majority of us are not bad people. We're highly educated, you know, and it's just sad that these small groups stain our image.
However, what will not change for the moment is the bulky regime of aid and subsidies, nor the housing policies to avoid the formation of ghettos, quite the contrary. The Social Democrat government of Magdalena Andersson wants to make even more money available without paying attention to relevant issues, such as the level of employment or entrepreneurship of the foreign population. Two factors that, along with education, are key to promoting integration. Make no mistake, the problem is not the number of immigrants in Sweden. The problem lies in the inefficient and inadequate system of benefits and subsidies of all kinds.
Yep.
In the end, such changes run the risk of criminalizing the entire foreign population without really achieving anything. And what can I say? That the government's response is to recognize the problem, blame immigration, make legal changes so that fewer foreigners come to the country, and then continue to shower those who are already there with more money? Does not seem very sensible, no matter how many votes the subsidies may generate for the ruling party. Because Sweden's problem is not immigrants, much less the lack of social spending. In fact, in Sweden, for example, social spending measured in terms of GDP is 52% higher than in Australia. The truth is that everything indicates that the problem is exactly the opposite. But having reached this point, it's your turn. With everything that you have seen, do you think that Sweden's real problem is immigration? Or is it instead the result of bad public policies? Leave us your comments below, and if you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming news. As always, thank you very much for being there. All the best.
Okay, so my opinion on this is that the problem is not immigration in general. The problem is the background checking, the selection of immigrants. Of course, we don't want to select because we don't want to be we don't want to go into prejudice, right? We don't want to judge people. We don't want to do that. But background checking and monitoring a few that have shady backgrounds, you know, criminal records, all of those things should be thoroughly checked before someone comes into the country. I'm not saying it should be monitored as in, you know, evasion of privacy, or sorry, invasion of privacy, not that, but they should know where the person is working. They should not be allowed to be, you know, wandering around the city like that. So I think immigration is not the problem. Just be more mindful of who you're allowing into your house. You know, I mean, I would gladly bring someone into my house if I knew they were good people, but I should keep an eye out, because it's not like that. It's like, oh, you should allow everyone to come into your house. It's not like that, because even though you have a good heart, you need to be smart, and because unfortunately other people, not everyone has a good heart. It is really tough. So I think immigration is not the problem. I'm sure that if Sweden had 100,000 trained professionals who are immigrants, that would not be a problem. That would not be a problem. In fact, immigrants such as myself, my wife, and all of my friends who are professionals, we are helpful, and we bring something to society. We, you know, we do our part as citizens of this country. Not citizens, I mean residents of this country. Residents. So I think you should definitely bring immigrants to your country, but make sure they're the right professionals, they're the right people. I mean, goodness, people do this with real estate. Whenever you rent a house or whenever you sell a house, you make sure that these are young professionals or, you know, experienced professionals. You thoroughly check who they are to rent a house to them. So why wouldn't you do that when people are coming to your country? You know, it is something that should be thoroughly brainstormed, and I'm sure there's a reasonable solution. Not getting rid of all of the immigrants, but just allowing the good people to come in. It's hard to be a judge of character. There are a lot of fake documents out there as well, but I'm sure there is something that they can do. As I said, if real estate can pull it off, the government can definitely pull it off. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but maybe they should implement a invitation-only system where you need somebody in the country to recommend the person. Like, I would recommend, I mean, I like, as I said, I'm a what you call it, I don't know, I forgot the expression. Let's say I'm a good resident. I can't find the word that I'm looking for, but I'm a good resident. I'm a professional. People know me. I'm a reputable, respectable professional. So I should be allowed to invite people to live in this country. So I think they should have like a recommendation basis. Not just allow anyone. You should have an invitation from a friend or family, or not family, because, you know, but just friends or people, you know, because family is complicated. You know, I can't, there's some people in my family that I can't and I wouldn't recommend. You know, I have some uncles who are pretty crazy, and I would not recommend them to live in Europe. But that isn't the point. The point is, I think it should be like a recommendation. You need a recommendation letter or from a company. But even so, companies, they don't really know people. But, you know, it should be an invitation only basis. I know it's unfair for people who don't have anyone who live here, but I don't know. It's something that you're not going to figure out here, sitting here thinking. It's something that needs a lot of discussion, lots of thoughts, lots of brainstorming. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested in this topic, and I know that things might not be as bad as the video portrays. I think Sweden is still a great country. But let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you like these type of videos, let me know in the comments down below. I get a little bit talkative, so I'm sorry. But I hope you enjoyed yourself. Take care. Bye bye. See you soon.